Join us as we explore the insightful perspective of architect Amin Nayyar from ANA Design Studio, a distinguished architect renowned for his profound impact on the design world. In collaboration with Aludecor, his dedication to excellence shines through in the transformative use of ACPs in projects like the Kashmir University. Get ready to be inspired as we explore the boundless possibilities of architecture and design with architect Amin Nayyar.
The choice to study architecture was more out of what I was not good at rather than what I was good at. I was horrible at mathematics. And this was one of the courses I got to know that you didn't really have to study math during graduation, which is a misnomer because a large part of our work done on maths, but that was one of the inclinations. Of course, I used to be good at art, I used to draw, I used to understand perspective. School of Planning and Architecture is really what molded me. That's my alma mater, that is my base. Whatever I am today is because of the people that I interacted in SPA. Both from the faculty side as well as people I studied with, people who were my seniors, juniors, things to learn. I've also sort of been a bit of a maverick in terms of work. I have never had a job. I started practice pretty much from the time I passed out. In fact, my first gig was when I was in fourth year with a few of my friends. So it's always been something that excited me. It's a fairly typical journey otherwise. Started with small projects, moved on to slightly bigger ones. Became fascinated with building technology, intelligent buildings, highly serviced buildings, and they seem to now find us as well. So most of our work now is to do with laboratories, institutions, high-end retail, currently for the last about a year infrastructure as well. So it's been an amalgamation of things that you learn and things that you apply, and the more you learn, the more you can apply. So that's how this practice has been. Commonalities are in terms of the fundamental of why architecture is there. And it is very different from why shelter is there. Shelter is not architecture, shelter is engineering. So the shelter aspects of things would remain common. It doesn't matter where you're building. You have to be protected from the elements, it has to be safe, it has to be spacious enough to be able to carry out the functions that you have thought about it. So in terms of sizing, space planning, basic shelter, things remain the same. But when it comes to urban design, there is a context which is already established. The city is already there. There is a surrounding where you're building. And there is a certain language that every city has. It may have developed out of material, it may have developed out of climate, it may have developed out of transport networks that are there, it may have developed out of a particular dominant industry that is there, or a food habit that is there. There are several reasons why architecture develops in a particular way. And when you're working in an urban environment, it has to be respected, because there are people who have done brilliant work before you, and therefore you need to be a continuum to good work that is happening so that people who come after you have something inspiring to look at. When you work in a rural area, I think ideally you should just disappear. The best architecture is what is not seen, because nature is there before you and nature will remain after you. So therefore, the built form of rural communities has a very small carbon footprint. It's extremely beautiful, very tactile, usually built by human hand, usually using materials that are already there. So if you've been asked to do something which is of a larger scale, which usually is, you may be building an industry or an institution, one has to be very, very careful to make it disappear as much as possible. So therefore use color palettes and materials that merge with the background. The tactile surfaces or things that are at eye level must be such that they are recognizable as rural forms and not something that you've taken from Singapore and planted somewhere else. And basically be even more respectful of nature than you would be in the city. The city offers you, in a manner of speaking, the opportunity to get away from being completely pliant with nature, because there is a microclimate that the city creates and you need to have artificial means to control it. When you're building outside the city, you don't want to go and spoil something there, so you try and work as much as possible with nature. If you look at some of our buildings, which incidentally may even be industrial in nature, the way the language is such that the building height does not appear to actually be what it is. It tends to be more horizontal. There's earthworms and so on and so forth. So your most important intention is to make the building disappear. For quite some time, definitely more than 15, 16 years. I don't remember how old your brand is, but I would have known about it right from the beginning. Your presence in the market is good. Your outreach is very good. Any trade shows that I go to, I will end up normally meeting somebody from your company. And also the reps drop by. So initially, I used to also meet a lot of people coming in. Now, of course, there are other people in the team who do it, but I'm aware of what's going on. Whenever we have used it, we started actually by using it in some of our interior projects initially. And in some pretty harsh environments like laboratories. And this was one of the few products that pretty much delivered what it promised in terms of abrasion resistance, in terms of resistance to gaseous compounds, in terms of longevity, in terms of malleability, workability, in terms of dent resistance. So apart from your brand, maybe one or two, there was a lot of stuff that we realized that the data sheets or the promises were the same. But when you put it to the test, it didn't meet the standards, your product did. And therefore it became a sort of a go-to brand to know that if we are going to use composites and if we are going to use this kind of a material, then this is something that we can specify. And I must say that not only did it meet the performance criteria, aesthetics were wonderful. There is always something new which is happening, and it is happening at a price point which is very reasonable. Unlike again brands that are maybe slightly, they may have an enhanced performance, but the price does not justify the enhanced performance. So I think you're very comfortably located between aesthetics, performance, price, which pretty much is the benchmark for any product. Kashmir University, some of the campuses are in urban areas. So for example, the main campus in Kashmir, although it is very large, it is pretty much in the fabric of Srinagar city, opposite Hazratbal. So while every vista in Kashmir is very beautiful, this is not really a far off or a rural or a remote location. It is an urban location. And while we wanted to use proportions and ideas that were respectful for the valley architecture, I believe that our customers, and I also believe personally as an architect, that there was this need felt to use materials that were more contemporary rather than going back to materials that were used traditionally and maybe used contemporarily as well. Definitely we were on a budget. So if we decided to want to clad a building in stone, it would simply not have been possible with the kind of budgets that there are. And this therefore became a good material because the valley climate is cold. It is very cold, it snows. When it is warm, it is fairly warm. Temperatures can go up to 35, 36. It is humid. Humidity can go up to 85, 90%. Even we were close to the lake. It's dusty. There's a lot of construction going on. There's a lot of mining going on around sand and all of these things. So we needed something that would stand the test of time, and we were comfortable that if we specified it in a building that was far away from us and in a sensitive location like Kashmir, we wouldn't be called to question a few years later. So again, the palette is muted. We didn't create buildings that are flamboyant. They don't need to be flamboyant by themselves. The buildings are extremely, this particular building specifically, the administration building that we're talking about, has won the BEE award for energy efficiency. Currently slated to be, if not the most, one of the most energy efficient buildings built by the government in Kashmir. And the researchers in Terry informed me that it is being used as a benchmark building for the rest of the valley. So therefore, what we wanted the facade to do in terms of keep the moisture out, not expand or contract too much, retain its color, not be damaged by extremely high sunlight or snow falling on it, and not allow, and I've already said, moisture to come inside, and to be able to bear insulation behind it without showing it. It's almost a perfect product. So therefore the choice, and then we've carried it inside as well in a few places to maintain continuity. The building is weathered beautifully. It's now about 5 years old, and a lot of people, when they mention it today, say, "Oh, you're a new project in Kashmir." So it's not a new project anymore. It's half a decade old. It looks brilliant. It's weathered very, very well. It's a well-loved building. It's a well-used building. It's the only building that has a complete glass atrium as a social area. So in any season, warm or cold, you will find people gathering in that area, and the walls are Aludecor. So it's a very nice composition. We are very proud of that building, and we are also very humbled to be associated with it and be used by so many people. I think one of the good things that has happened in the last 4 or 5 years, and frankly we have something terrible to thank for it, which is climate change and the diseases that it brings. The idea of climate change has now become central to discussion. You will find fewer naysayers. There used to be a lot. I mean, I have been involved with bioclimatic research and architecture for the last more than 25 years. Initially, it used to be mentioned as a fad. पैसे ज़्यादा खर्च करना है तो green building बना लो. That kind of thing. Today, we are realizing that whatever we've been up to is hurting our children, it's hurting us, it's hurting the environment, it's hurting everything. And there is a very direct economic fallout of poor practices in construction. So I think people have become serious. Once people become serious and it becomes a topic that is required, the lawmakers also sit up and take notice. And therefore there is that strength that is offered to whatever needs to change. Standards are changing. I think there needs to be a lot more education behind what exactly is low energy or better energy architecture. So far, sometimes people are misled into believing that if you create a green wall or if you plant 5 trees, it's adequate. It's not. You start with how much material are you going to use in your building, what is the embodied energy that goes into first the production of the building itself. Because by the time that material arrives on your site, you've already done whatever you had to do with the environment. You've already burnt coal, you've done whatever you had to do, cut down trees, mine something. So we need to start minimizing that. And I think that, based on codes, based on what has happened in earthquakes, etc., there's been a shift away. There's been a sort of a pendulum swing towards doing things over-designed almost. It's the same for electrical, it's the same for air conditioning, it's the same for space planning. So I think the pendulum now needs to get balanced between safety, what we need to spend in terms of energy and material, and what impact we get out of it. The second is that I think we need to go back very, very urgently and very quickly to saying that it's not just green buildings, it is healthy buildings that we're going to make. So what kind of volatile organic compounds we are releasing into the air, what kind of filtration, how much natural plantation, what kind of oxygenation, what kind of space, what kind of light, how are we behaving with biorhythms for people, etc. I think those things need to now become mandated as code. So even if somebody has not spent years and years researching it, it is now available to people as code to say if these are the 10 mandatory performance parameters that you need to do. Rather than saying you must have a green wall and there must be 5 trees, I think it needs to be you will create so much oxygenation and you will not exceed so much embodied energy in your building. Which of course needs to have back-end research to say that every kg of steel has so much energy and therefore we will allow you. So it's got to be like FAR. You can't build more than so much on this plot of land. You also cannot use more than so much energy as embodied and as active energy to continue using your building. I think that and integration. I think there's been too many walls being built, too much of car-centric, vehicle-centric design that's being done. You need to drive to places, you need to drive to school, you need to drive to this and that. It needs to stop. We need to have more integrated developments. Our master plans need to acknowledge the fact that human beings who go to office are also the human beings who stay at houses, are also the human beings who shop. So therefore, these can all be together. You don't need to designate areas and say Nehru Place mein raat mein koi nahi jata. I mean, it's just, those things need to change. And there is dialogue around it. I think people are beginning to experiment. There are some excellent examples of work that is being done. There is a major initiative of the central government for redesign of railway stations. I think it's a brilliant initiative because that is the only mass mode transport that connects city center to city center. Airports will always connect the outside of a city to the outside of another city, and then you take a cab. I mean, Goa as an example, nice airport, no problem. If you want to go to Panaji or if you want to go to South Goa, you spend 5,000 rupees on a cab. So it's railways are the only thing. And the nice thing is that they're not saying railways for railways' sake, they're saying railway station as a city center. So allow people to come in, let there be commerce, let people hang out, let there be parks, let there be a place for kids to play, integrate an office, integrate a shopping mall, have food and beverage, get people collected. I think that's really a fabulous initiative. A fabulous initiative, and once a few of these come out and become successful, it becomes a huge incentive even for the private sector developer to say, I could replicate this. So from this very isolated, behind a boundary wall, you drive to a mall kind of thing, the city becomes walkable, pedestrian friendly, active, people are there at all times of the day, there is no shop closing time really, you don't need it. So there are things that will happen, and I'm very excited about the fact that this is happening in our time, and hopefully we go down the path where 20 years from now we leave behind a legacy that's better for people to improve, and we also don't feel ashamed of what we've done. Amongst the materials that we are excited about is aluminium composite panels. I believe something called Nexcom will be launched by you guys very, very shortly. It's something that literally we've been waiting for in the country to be launched. We've had an opportunity to use similar material in projects outside the country. The rigidity and strength that it offers, the number of lines on the facade reduce, installation times reduce. The buildings begin to look much more simple, neat, well detailed, and more approachable. It has a better energy performance than ACP does. It has a longer life, and using it in conjunction with good quality insulation or vapor barriers, it can pretty much replace in a lot of areas of buildings the outside walls. You don't actually need it. If you just have a frame with this material cladded on with insulation or vapor barrier, you're done. You don't need walls. So it lightens up the structure, and I think there is a need for this kind of material to now be not just manufactured in India but also to be widely available and talked about. So the communication behind why is very important. Right now, one of the things that I do feel is happening in the surface materials industry is that the conversation typically begins and ends on aesthetics. At the most, vapor barrier or waterproofing. But it doesn't go beyond that. The surface material does not become a replacement for blockwork, brickwork, to be directly clad on a structure and to just have a liner inside, etc. I think that kind of communication needs to come out, and we need to stop building contemporary buildings with age-old technology. And if you're using very contemporary materials, well-engineered materials which have a particular performance which will replace something which is traditional, there needs to be a better communication around it. I would give it a lot of respect for the reasons that I probably mentioned before. Technical parameters that are written about, we have tested them and we found them to be spot on. We've never had a situation where the company has promised something as a performance but not delivered on it. It has always delivered on the performance. The second part would be definitely the price point. I don't know how you guys manage it, but you manage it very well. I think the pricing, the way it is positioned, it's very affordable. It meets existing criteria of budget making for buildings. So we've never ever had to fight to include it on any aspect. And it's also not become something which is so run of the mill that people would say, "Can use kar rahe?" So you guys have maintained that degree of exclusivity and something which is nice, but it is available at a good price point, performs very well. So near perfect. It's almost and I don't, like I said, your management needs to really be applauded for whatever they've done.